Good evening to one and all present here. I, Kia Edusani,
And I, Aditya Agarwal.
welcome you all on the behalf of Team EDC NIT Durgapur. On the onset of eSummit 2022, Team EDC is proud to present the first keynote speaker for the event.
Artificial intelligence, the word, puts all of us in nostalgia. All of us surely have experienced and embraced a moment when we had first encountered a super intelligent system in a science fiction movie. A system that has solution to every problem and that gave our hero an unbounded control and power. We all used to get in our imaginative boots and start thinking about the possibilities which had no limitations. And it gave us an indelible memory, and that we cherish till today. Now, the enthusiasts who take a leap of faith and pursue this field to explore the possibilities encounter how people around the globe have induced artificial intelligence and machine learning in daily life. Since the boom of internet, the amount of data we have has strengthened the spine of data science to attain new heights that have been never imagined before.
From cracking the Enigma code in Second World War to precisely predicting your preferences in modern day, machine learning and artificial intelligence is being witnessed by the human race for the past 60 years. And today, we have Sir Tarry Singh, who has remained a frontier person, advocate, and an instructor for a very long time. Sir is a columnist, CEO, founder, and AI neuroscience researcher of AI startup Deep Kappa. Sir has already trained more than 50,000 enthusiasts, and this number is growing in an exponential rate. His knowledge and experience is truly remarkable, a session that one must not miss out upon. And his keen and refined perspective on the same is a thing to witness, and we are deeply grateful to have you here today, sir. Welcome, sir. How have you been?
So you're not audible. So please turn on.
Yes.
Thank you. I hope I'm audible now.
Yes.
Thank you for inviting me. It's obviously an honor to serve the generation that will lead the world towards the new technology. So it is. I'm very happy and very pleased and very grateful that I'm here, and I hope we can have a very interesting conversation and helping all the young students, perhaps even professionals who are watching this, exchange information and learn from each other.
Sure. So we have a lot of expectations from this session, and so we would now like to pass it on to you. You can start your session whenever you want to.
Great. I thought I had we were doing a question Q&A. Was that the way you want to do it, or how do you want to do it?
So that's upon you. If you want to start with some brief introduction, or we can go ahead with the questions as well. We are.
Okay. I don't have a slide prepared, and there was a reason why I didn't do this, because normally when you see in presentations, people come with all slides. They're all prepared to tell you how wonderful AI is, how great machine learning is working, and how wonderful their companies have done a great job in figuring out how to solve poverty or detect cancer, or perhaps even do some interesting things like making you choose the best dress. If you're standing in front of a big large screen, the AI's model will give you a beautiful a shirt and a trouser, and then they say, wonderful, this is AI. But obviously not everything is as great and as beautiful and as flashy as we all like to believe. First of all, for those who are beginners in this group, the fundamental thing that you need to understand is there is intelligence in the software, but there is no intelligence in terms of how you and I as human beings make decisions on a daily basis. So just to give you an example, each one of you If you came to the college today or you came to your university, you had a different path. You chose an entirely different path. And can you encapsulate that path and that trajectory, the speed, the experiences, the things you looked around, they gave you inspiration, some things irritated you, is different. Each path is different. But what we try to do when people talk about AI is they try to uniform this journey. They say, well, from A to B, you can sit and everything is taken care of you because AI is going to solve it. So from that perspective, I like to sort of reassure you that the humans will always be in control, because eventually you're developing software that solves the problem. Also know that the problem that you're solving is a mathematical problem, or essentially it is a problem which you convert into mathematical formulas and software that solves that specific problem. Checking prices of airplanes or comparing which is the fastest, taxi services at Uber or Ola. So they tend to solve some problems for you, which is great because you don't want that headache, right? But the ingenuity and the real intelligence versus the artificial intelligence is still in your hands. And I believe that that is something you should always remember when you're building AI. Because eventually when I say you're building AI, it essentially is you're writing software to solve that problem in a technical way by developing software, which is based its foundation on statistical models, all right? And I thought this was a better way of sort of giving you a bit of a high-level introduction. I can sort of take the discussion in any directions, but I thought perhaps this was a great way for us to have a question and answer. I feel this is the best way to actually address even keynotes, because it's not one-way traffic. I'll stand here for 1 hour and I'm giving long lectures and you guys are thinking, sure, I mean, I've read this on TEDx, I've seen other videos. So I hope I could share a lot of practical experiences. There's a lot of good experience, but there's also a lot of difficult experience, which people think that can solve with AI. A bit of introduction. First of all, obviously, I'm very grateful for that introduction you gave me. I see myself as someone who is building software that solves a problem. So we have a few startups we are launching out of our lab, our Deep Kappa lab. One is trying to solve the problem of climate AI. The other is trying to solve the problem of energy with oil and gas and other companies that are struggling to understand their data. In ethics is a very big important question. In ethics, we are trying to solve a problem. One of our researchers is from India. She did her PhD in social sciences, and she's trying to solve the problem of how we perceive, for example, women. How do men see women? And we are doing a research right now, developing a model in which we're looking at Indian movies, in which, the male-driven sort of Indian movie in which the guy will save the girl, the man will solve the problem, and the women. Okay, the new movies, I believe the girls are still getting tough, but back in the days when I was growing up, when you had actors like Amitabh Bachchan and Vinod Khanna, and these were the actors of my sort of generation. They were the macho men, but unfortunately, with this specific characteristics of male, women turned into being someone always sad in the kitchen and cooking for her sons and husbands and fathers. And we are trying to understand this through the lens of AI. What kind of impact does it have when young men when they see women in movies who are taking a role of someone who's suffering and struggling? And you and I know it's a genuine problem as well. But we are going much deeper in trying to understand violence against women and how, due to these movies, sometimes how things become quite difficult because you start perceiving women differently. So those are the real problems I think AI should be solving. That can solve problems of child prostitution, that can solve problems in domestic abuse, that can solve problem in essentially trying to identify where oppression is taking place inside our societies. And those are the fantastic projects we are doing within our research lab. There's a lot more, but I'm sure you will have questions and I would love to answer these.
Sure, sir. So we starting with the Q&A session then. Sir, like you've told about how AI can be useful in the social aspect and all such aspects. So would you please stress upon the aspect of business, how AI and data science can change the landscape of business? Could you please elaborate a little more upon that?
So from a business perspective, as I just explained, you already see these applications today, right? If you're looking for a job, today, HR managers cannot go through thousands of CVs. But the problem is, how do you know which is the right resume versus not the right resume? Who to select based on the things they see on paper versus who they are and what they can do. To a certain extent, it is helping people to start becoming more, you have to give better information on your resume. Sometimes, for example, it's a stroke of luck that you're interviewing a candidate. And if I look at, and I have that on a daily basis, sometimes I'm looking at a candidate and I say, oh, it's just 1-page resume. All right. And then if I talk to that person, they have done so much more, but they are not able to put that on the paper because maybe they don't have great writing skills, or maybe they are too shy to talk about their projects, or for some other reason that maybe 6 months ago they did their resume. In businesses, this is a simple problem in HR hiring process, but think in terms of trying to solve simple problems inside your organization in terms of, let's say I'm sitting in this room, there's a lot of lighting in this room, and all these lamps that are burning, they are LED lamps. They're not anymore the old-fashioned lamps that consume a lot of energy. But the question is, why do I have I have like 8 lamps burning just for one person in this room? It's a waste of energy, but also waste of the focus. Perhaps only these 3 lamps could burn. And so based on my location, it's a very simple, you don't even need actually deep learning for this. But you could solve things like Tarry is sitting in the corner of a room and he needs light in that room. And then you do a bit of pattern analysis. And then you will see that in this room, when people come, mostly they sit in this specific corner. What happens is then in terms of architectural intelligence and urban intelligence, you can start designing rooms and buildings based on the behavior. Because essentially, we are animals and we are social animals. And we like to do things in a certain way. I mean, you know yourself, when you're sitting in your home, when you have dinner in your dining table with your parents and brothers and sisters, always everyone has a specific seat they go and sit there. Why do they do that? Okay. But the thing is, that's something which is a behavior. That is wonderful. That's who we are, social animals. We like to congregate. We like to do wonderful things. But from a large company, let's say it's a big company like Geo or Bharat Petroleum or some other big massive company in India, I guess Ola or Flipkart or something. If they were to look at their physical infrastructure, they could use simple pattern analysis and pattern recognition and start proposing, designing architectures, but also the furnitures and et cetera, based on the way employees use space. So these are we're just still scratching the surface of getting this intelligence across various domains inside the way people behave, the way people work, the way people are performing. And that will give a lot of intelligence to businesses. Today, businesses know nothing, to be very honest with you. I mean, imagine a company like Flipkart. They have like tens of thousands of employees. If you were to ask, what is that department doing? There's a manager who will say they are an IT team or they are web developers. But they will never be able to understand the real value of that team in terms of commercial value, in terms of the successful projects that they have done, in terms of how fast they are in being able to do wonderful projects for you. And that kind of internal organizational intelligence is also absent. What are you going to do? How are you going to find out? While you have everything available, all those things, all the patterns are inside your company, but companies haven't captured that. So the potential of AI is huge. And I can give you many examples that way.
Yes, so we haven't thought of that way. I mean, how people behave, that was something new we got to know.
Yes, sir. So now I would have another question. That you have talked about data manipulation and how AI uses data manipulation. So my question is, in future, what are we looking for? Are we looking for completely like data manipulation, or at some point in the future, we will need the assistance of cognitive consciousness from an AI? We would need that kind of assistance from an AI for the future.
So,
Do we need cognitive consciousness?
do we need cognitive intelligence? So again, I think this is very good question, because cognition is primarily based on the way we function as mammals, or even as insects or organisms. And cognition is purely based on what form of need do we have, right? I think as human beings, I can imagine our needs are on the Maslow principle, perhaps much higher. They are far, beyond that survival skills, as in I need food, I need shelter. So is cognitive intelligence going to help transform the way we are doing business? I think so, because eventually that is the pursuit which all these big companies have today. OpenAI with the GPT-3 is trying to sort of, scratch the surface, but they are still, I don't think there's any system in the world today that understands the general artificial intelligence, the AGI, where you have cognition understood by machines. But for example, I can give you an example of one of my mentor. He's a professor at the university in California, and he's 80 years old. Dr. Rao Mikileni. He's from Andhra Pradesh, but he left India like in the 60s. His PhD supervisor is a Nobel Prize winner. When he did his PhD in the late 60s, I was not even born then. And he has been working on this problem for a long time about, we call this autopoiesis, in which self-organizing systems. Because as human beings, we are self-organizing, right? We come together in a certain format, we disperse, the groups disperse based on certain behaviors. How do you know how a group organizes itself and disorganizes itself? In the same way, imagine if organizations could use data to create similar to what cognition is, because I still feel cognition is very hard to capture because it's a very fluid process. It's not a process that can be written in conditional logic like we write software. But there are, and that's why I mentioned the name of my mentor, there are many groups, research groups, that are currently working on a supervisor and worker modules. So for example, my brain is the supervisor, just like your thesis supervisor or your professor. So they tell you, and you have to do things. So my brain is a supervisor, and every other function in my body is essentially a worker module. My hand, muscular activity, how I do things, I move my hands, and how my body functions is all based on what my brain is telling my body to do. And that is how you can at least create a structure of cognition that is in a similar way an organization should organize itself. So organizations figured out a way 100 years ago to have some form of organizational intelligence inside companies, right? There is a CEO. You don't have 50 CEOs inside a company, right? So there is one CEO, and then you have other functions, and they, I wouldn't know how to, let's just say there's one CEO and then everybody else is a worker. So the CEO is basically telling every other worker to do different things. Sometimes he says, well, you 50 workers, you should do these things. The other times it says, now 2 workers, you do these things. And this is how you organize. So this is basically the foundational elements of cognition. And I do believe that if we have done the data understanding, the way I explained about pattern analysis and pattern recognition, you will be able to describe each function in a way that eventually embodies this whole organization, and those data or those pockets of data will be managed by certain worker functions. So the brain is making sure that the company is working and operationally sort of being excellent. The closest example that can come is companies that are trying to do that is Netflix and companies like that. They're trying to put a lot of intelligence inside their machine learning and deep learning libraries to ensure that there are not thousands of people or human beings calling you, hey, Terry, did you like that movie? And you would say, oh, that seems very simplistic. But it's not just that thumbs up or thumbs down, which you have on Netflix. Behind that, there is a sea of sort of analysis and analytic tools that are giving this company information about me. And that is amazing, because all I'm doing is I'm selecting a thumbs up or thumbs down. And a few years ago, if you're using Netflix, if you remember, there were a star rating. So there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stars. So you could choose, it's 3-star. But then suddenly the management decided that we don't care. Why should we care if it's 2-star or 4-star? Because how do I know if it's if the 1 star still means Tarry likes the movie? It could be that he could give 4 stars, but still will not watch the movie. We only care if they watch movies. So thumbs up means fine. Thumbs down means not fine. But in the back end, there is a lot of intelligence around everything that I have watched. And then they decide, and that has been a far simpler. So simpler functions is what, that's how human body functions. So our brain functions based on a very, very little voltage, okay? It has the lowest voltage measured in terms of the computers that you have. And what you see today is many big companies like NVIDIA and all this, each year you see the GPUs are getting bigger. They're getting even much, much bigger, all right? But the thing is, the bigger the GPU does not solve the problem of intelligence. The reason they're building bigger GPUs is because they want to ingest more data. But you and I know, as a human being, we just need a small information to make a big decision in life. I'll give you an example. Let's say you're sitting in a park, and then you're sitting, you're having fun, everybody is fine. And then out of nowhere, you look to your left and you see a lion standing next to you. Now, you don't need a big GPU to crunch and tell you that you have to get the hell out of there, okay? So you just need one neuron that gets activated, and that tells you run for hell, because otherwise you're going to get eaten by this lion. And so think always of building systems that are intelligent. And the intelligence is based on cognition, which can be derived from very simple principles. And that's how you develop these worker functions. So the only worker function my brain cell had to give a message to my motor cells was to my legs. Stand up and get the hell out of there, because there's a lion standing next to you. So think always in terms, when you're designing systems, don't make it overcomplicated. Don't go to your manager and say, I need a big GPU, I need this big data set, I have to train it. Always think in terms of cognition and what cognitive principles are. I hope this gives you a bit of a perspective.
So now, I'll ask you a question. My personal experience, I first watched that Iron Man movie, and I saw the and I saw you know from my friends have come to this statement. So what was your experience that clicked that yes, this is artificial intelligence and machine learning? It's not as you were an enthusiast in 2008, I have seen a video that you were advocating for artificial intelligence in 2008. That time that and that we have today. So what was your mind? Yes, I have to do something else.
You are not so much audible.
Yeah, so I'll try to summarize your question. Were you asking what was my motivation to get into AI?
What was it?
I was doing my best to listen, and she's right. It was a bit difficult because I think there's a paper moving or some noise coming. But no,
so
no
now
worries.
I'm audible.
Yeah.
Now I'm audible.
Yes.
This is
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry, sir. So the exact question, like, what was your motivation? Like for us, the young generation, it's like we all have watched that Iron Man movie and we saw super intelligent system like Jarvis or everything. And seeing your videos, like you were an enthusiast and advocate since 2008, so very early. So what was your motivation at that time? Like, yes, we should work on that.
1 second. Ik ben in gesprek. Wie moet u hebben? Sorry? Sorry? Yeah. Gaat u daar? Sorry, there was a visitor. Or how about I take my laptop to another room? Maybe that makes it easier.
Okay.
Zit je hier kloppen? Okay, this is practical. So you guys can see me. I'm just walking back to my office. I was in a meeting room. The motivation, I hope you guys can still hear me.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Perfect. So I guess to me, the motivation was actually this at the back end. If you see at the background, I've always loved data or information. So I started off my career as a database or a developer, software developer. And to me, it was actually strange because when you see databases today, they collect a lot of information, your buyer behavior, everything else. And I've always, in my free time, and this is already 20, 25 years ago, I used to sit around and try to understand things because a table in a database, as some of you may know, if you've played with databases, a database is a collection of like hundreds, thousands, sometimes even tens of thousands and millions of tables. And table in itself is just a reflection, a fraction of reflection of that information. If it's a Flipkart's database, it'll have a lot of information. So I always used to try to understand and connect those data, the tables, and try to derive insights as to what time are people coming in. I used to do that always, on my off time hours, because my manager or my boss was never asking me those questions. So I was just curious about information. I've always been curious about information as to how long do people stay at work? How many people have bought this product? How often people have bought this product? But if so many people have done this, what can be next? So there were simple models we've used in the past, regression models that give you some information on some predictive capabilities. That was one source. So there was one source of inspiration to just understand the world through the eyes of data. The second source of inspiration was neuroscience. So, okay, data is what my eyes see. My eyes are seeing data, but my brain is reasoning and asking questions to analyze that. And I, back in early 90s, beginning of 90s, 1992, 93, a lot of researchers in AI, which obviously you guys were not even born there. There was a lot of information. People were trying to understand how brain works from computational perspective, meaning not simply brain. So you don't need to go to a brain surgeon. You go to a neuroscientist to understand how is my eyes connected to the rest of my body? What is our neocortex at the back of my head? Or how do we reason? If I do this, my hand moves to left, but what function of my brain tells me to do that? And that curiosity was driven. I'm not a neuroscientist myself. I am a trained physicist, so I understand things from physics and from astronomy. That was part of my minor. But I was introduced to neuroscience through a colleague back in the early 90s, this 30 years ago. And I read a lot about neuroscience and computational neuroscience. In fact, I have a book here. And this person, let me show you. So it's a very good question. So in my office, I have this book here. So this book's name is The Emperor's Mind. And if you look, the name of this gentleman, Roger Penrose, he just won a Nobel Prize this year. He's 80 years old, and he's also a good friend of my mentor. And Dr. Roger Penrose is, a leading mathematician in the world. And I've read this book. This is a 30-year-old book, and I bought it again just, I think, a few weeks ago. So it talks about the capabilities a human brain has. And Dr. Penrose, Roger Penrose, has been studying this for a long time, just like Professor Hinton, Jeffrey Hinton, and the leading figures in AI. But Roger Penrose is also a leader people look up to, and he, as I mentioned last year, he got a Nobel Prize. So I've read a lot of his books back from then, understanding how the mind works, because brain is not mind. Mind is a creation of brain. If your brain is a physical object, that little sort of gluey, sticky mass object, mind is what you think and what you create and what you invent. So that fascination has been with me for, well, I think any little child has that, right? We all want to understand the world. And I got a little bit more interested and excited about computational neuroscience, meaning how do actually the neurons compute? We have created neuronal, we know how to build a neural architecture, AI systems, but how do actually those cells, a neuron is a cell, right? It's a cell. So your human body has 3.7 trillion cells, including your skin. There are different types of cells types. Neuron is a cell type. And that is only part of a certain fraction of your brain. Not all cells in your brain have neurons. They are all full of cells. And neuron is a wonderful, interesting cell because it has a body, it has axons, it has a long tail, electricity passes through it. So I was just fascinated by it. So, and the last 10, 15 years, there's this again new wave of AI and, deep learning has become popular, but it's just a topic I've always read about. I read about there's a lot of neuroscience books there on my shelf in my office in the corner, and each time I keep reading because there's no end to it, and no one is an expert. So I feel like a student, and I just keep learning about it. So those are my inspirations. I hope, I don't know, you guys also are deriving that, and you should. It's very important to do that because AI is not very exciting. In 4 or 5 years, you'll be doing something else. You'll be doing Web3. You'll be doing tokenization, smart contracts. You just keep chasing the new shiny object. But remember, intelligence, cognitive intelligence, human intelligence is probably the most fascinating thing that has kept us intrigued. And I think you should do that too, all of you.
Yes, sir. Definitely, it might have motivated among our audience for some good research. So another question from being a student myself, I have been working, but the first model I've been working was on Boston home dataset, the way I've started machine learning. So the data is very much cluttered. So we have to apply a lot of filters. So what should be our thought process that what filters we should apply to derive a goal? Like this is the result we want and this kind of filters that we should apply on the Boston data set. And what is the data, like how to filter it?
Yeah, I think this is a great question, actually. This is a very good question. Because first of all, not every data set you will get in your hands will be Boston data set.
Yes.
Because some of you students are doing internships, some of you, and every one of you will get a job, I hope soon once you finish your college. The minute you enter the office of that new employer, your new customer or your new boss, they will not give you a Boston data set. There's going to be some manager who's going to come to your desk and say, oh, so you studied machine learning and data science? Okay. Sit here, log into this system, and I want you to download this data from this database. And I want you to make a prediction for the number of customers who we should be selling or sending more of our scooters to deliver more food. Where is most demand generation? And I also want you to make a prediction on the areas which are suffering and where we are having less business. So we are not sending our scooters and cabs, we keep bringing fresh foods to those houses. I want you to find out what is the problem and what are the new techniques we should use to encourage those customers to also buy more products. This is how they come to you. And I just thought of this question. I'm sure Ola and all these companies are thinking the same things because everyone wants to maximize profit. So here's the question, but the answer is this. Understanding data and filtering, as you mentioned, or pre-processing is the ultimate key before you can do anything with these kind of questions, answering these questions. So doing fine-grained data analysis, there are certain cleaning tasks you have to do. So, for example, this practical example I just gave you, when this manager walks away, you're exporting that information in Excel or CSV or doing some things. The first things maybe you'll do is, okay, let me just use pandas data frame, and then you're doing things. And then you'll start seeing a lot of problems because essentially you're trying to convert that question into the data frame that you need to create and eventually do some analysis. You have to do univariate or bivariate or multivariate analysis on that information based on the question that he's asking. He's asking questions, what is happening in region A, where we want our customers so we can improve our delivery, because some regions are asking too much from us, other regions are not buying anything. So it's creating a demand and a supply chaos, man. And you're a data scientist. Why don't you go and solve that problem for me? And so for you, the most important thing is to ensure that, is that clean information, or there are a lot of empty values inside that information. So I'm sure all of you students are doing NaN, not a number, all those information, how to remove NaNs, how to replace them, how to fill them with something meaningful in order to make analysis that helps you give when you go back to your boss and say, hey, I built this for a system. And don't think he's going to say, wow, you saved my life. He's going to say, well, this is nonsense because you still haven't done this, you haven't done that, you haven't done this. But this is a very important process, because when you're on Boston dataset, there's no one telling you that you're doing a useless job. But in real world, it's okay to hear that you're doing a useless job because data is just not clean. It's messy, it hasn't been connected. You haven't done simple analysis, exploratory data analysis. So before you're even making any predictions, you need to spend enough time to understand the data. And you've seen all these Medium articles. There's always some LinkedIn hero or some other data science star writing about how I did this. But it's important to understand that the data analysis is a process through which you will learn the basics and fundamentals and foundations of statistical analysis. And all the things that you're learning in theory today, you will apply it. And believe me, it's a great joy because you will really learn about those systems. You will learn what ANOVA is. You will learn how to do these, X-variate type of analysis. And slowly and steadily, you will start understanding the use of regression versus, using a support vector machine, which can be fine to solve a problem. No, not everything has to be thrown into, let me just create a deep learning model and, I will use it on Google Colab and let me train it. Some problems can be solved in very simplistic ways. And I'll give you a practical example. Yesterday or day before yesterday, my son came. Professor had given him a data from the 17th century. Okay, so it was 100 years of data, and the data it was really messy. And he thought my dad is he's an AI guy, so let him solve my problem. And he's studying history, so he gave me that Excel sheet which had like 49 columns. It was like massive. 49 is still not enough. But for a simple question that they had to ask was, they just wanted to tell, his professor had asked him a question. Can you tell me, because back in the 17th century in the Netherlands, most of the people used to work on fields. There were no bank directors or there was no CEO of Google. All these companies didn't exist. So there were no IT nerds in the 17th century. Everybody was a worker, field worker. Some people were selling cheese. Some people were, for example, my office, this is 200 years old office. It was a bakery. So, and you just saw me sitting there. And at the back, you saw the weighing scale, if you just remember. That weighing scale is the weighing scale people used 200 years ago to sell bread. So it was a bakery. So they asked him a question. And when I looked at the data, I said, oh my God, this is messy as hell. Because same information was there several times in columns. Then there were, there was one column that had information in string format and also numerical. So very simple, and it was as an object. If you do a let's say df dot describe, if you want to describe what is the data I'm looking at, you will see it's either integer, 64-bit or 128-bit, and you see object. And if you convert object into string, then you will see a string or whatever. So there were information that was just written differently, because back in the 17th century, they were not thinking that 300 years later, some guys will use AI to understand us. They don't care, right? Some person in the municipality was just writing information, who are land workers, who's a cheesemaker, who is working in the fields and all that shit. So data understanding is one. Creating a data that a system understands is the second big step, probably the biggest step ever. And I know most of the data scientists and young folks, they all want to jump and start using deep learning. But believe me, become a hero in data understanding, become a champion in making that machine understand your data first. And the job of letting the machine do and figure out a great algorithm, predictive algorithm or prescriptive algorithm, is probably the least important of this three-step process. Unfortunately, what I see when I see a lot of people, even experienced people, they weigh a lot of importance on the last step. While no one wants to do understanding of data, maybe some people do, and I know for sure no one wants to sit and clean and create a nice data set which the system wants to understand. So I think data understanding, and when you mentioned filtering, etc., these are the most important things. And these skills, if you have, believe me, you will be able to solve any data. It could be video data, it could be text data. Then you will start understanding the importance of clubbing, ensembling, and stacking information. So I would say focus a lot on data understanding, and equally enough to clean and prepare the data for the machine.
Yes, sure. And so one more question is that, like that data, we from the boom of internet, we have a lot of data. But there is another thing, that the data privacy, the companies that are collecting the data is for sure they're held by, stocked by big tech giants like Facebook and Google. So sometimes it's just induce the privacy of normal people. So to get the data to make the systems more and more good, they somehow breaks the privacy. So what's your take on that? Like sometimes company, for the greed and for the better algorithm, they sometimes take the data that a person might not want to give.
So that is a problem which, you cannot blame the tech companies alone, because see, if the US government and the European governments and the Indian government or any other government knew what internet was supposed to do or could do, and they were getting warnings even back then. So people were saying, it's something you don't understand. You should think in terms of regulation and understanding and making people aware what is going on. So for example, this is a video conversation. I have agreed to do this with you. So in this agreement, I also give you, to a certain extent, if you don't have a contract, I believe there was a question you asked about smart contract. So if there is a smart contract, then you and I are on the same page in terms of what you will do with my information based on that smart contract from a blockchain perspective. Now, if you breach that contract, let's say the agreement was you will use my information, this video will be used in the university, it can be used in lectures, it can be used in marketing. And I said, yes, 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 I agree, I agree, I agree. That's a smart contract. Now, if you do a different thing, then there is no way for me to control what are you going to do with my information. That's what Google and Facebook decided to do, because they said, instead of saying that I will do this and this, they just said your data will be used to improve our services. That's it. Enough for them to be able to have a free blank check to do whatever they want to do. Now, that is the Web 2.0 world, in which companies like Google, Facebook, Amazon, and all these other companies, Microsoft, everyone is doing that. Even your local software SaaS startup is doing that with you. Ola is doing it. Everyone is doing it. I don't think there is anyone particular to blame in this. So I know we all like to have someone to blame. That's the way the society works. You want to blame a company because they are the ones, but everybody's in it together. So I think going forward, it would be good if we are able to come up with a Web3 model in which anything that is yours, if you have a contract, a smart contract with someone, he or she or that person or that entity, a legal entity, can do the things which you agreed. But if they do something which is new, you are alerted because the smart contract will eventually alert you. So you know, hey, Google is trying to sell your data to a broker in Brazil, and that is a breach of the smart contract. So I think so. The privacy is. I know it's an important discussion. We have that all the time, but people have not, and the governments have not. The legal authorities have not built a tool and given you the tool to understand what. And there are many software companies and some startups that created tools, so you can check. You can use that on your browser, and you get information of what is happening to your data. There are some folks who are doing that, I know. But to create a legal framework in order to allow you to know what's going to happen with your data, there is no control of it today, unfortunately. So everything that you're sharing is not owned by you; it is owned by tech companies, which is the unfortunate reality today. We don't, unless we move towards a Web 3.0 model in which we will have some form of a blockchain, smart contracts, having some RPC protocols in which whatever that is happening and you agree to it is fine. If you don't agree to it, then the contract is broken and then everything gets shut down. But it's not. It sounds easy, but I still think that the industry needs to make a lot of progress in order to allow that we can share data to a certain extent. And when we feel that our data is being misused by data providers, we should be able to pull the actually call, be able to ask them and eventually stop and disallow them to use your data. So I think we still have a lot of work to do.
Yes, sir. Now another question, one last question from my side, then we will take the questions from the audience. Sir, you have a great exposure of the European and the Western world, and I to some extent feel that they are much ahead in this field of artificial intelligence and machine learning as compared to India. So India has a much potential workforce, the students, and very much enthusiasts. So
Absolutely.
what would you suggest? Many professors and students are definitely watching this stream. So what would you suggest? Like, this should be the thought process, or this should be your mind. This should be in your mind, so that you can take India at least at the level the world is, and even beyond that. So what's the process that we should follow?
Adding to that question, how many years India actually take to reach a level where we can call that, yes, we are people who are knowing AI. We know AI and we use it for the applications.
Yeah. So, and I think from the India context, I always, I left India because I fell in love with a girl. I had no ambition to leave India. I love my country. It's a beautiful country. It's a country that gave me birth and everything, all the beautiful things. And India is probably the best country in the world when it comes to dedication, when it comes to desire, when it comes to motivation, when it comes to honesty. And of course, there's always, there's not everything is as clean and beautiful, but in all, Indians, I've never seen our Indian community of students getting into trouble. Their only goal is to learn, and do wonderful things. The thing is, that's why most our Indian community has succeeded all over the world. Today, the examples that people share on social media that, we have the biggest, we have all the CEOs of big companies. That's just a fraction. Indians are the backbone of most of these successful companies in the world. That's true. And what has always dismayed me is the country that has the best technology institutes, the most beautiful brain that is coming out of India. Why haven't we been able to do anything in India in a way that the world would come? But I think it's happening. Believe me, it's just taking too long, which is frustrating because there are some economic constructs, and India had to come a long way. Don't forget, our history is Everybody talks about Ukraine today, which is very painful what's going on in this, and it's the worst thing that the world has happened. But India has gone through suppression that has lasted centuries. So from where India has come all the way to 1947, and from 1947 to today where we are, India has shown already that it's a beautiful country. So I think it seems in a lifetime, it seems, I want India to be the best hubs. Every city in India will have the most beautiful technology hubs. But I think it'll come for sure. Your generation will definitely see it with the right leadership. And I dream of an India that becomes a powerhouse, not only because of a powerhouse that exports talent, but a powerhouse that actually is exporting goods and services and is becoming a major supplier, not just human brain supplier, but products and services supplier, because they are creating those services in India. So I don't know why it's taking so long, but I also understand that in terms of the number of years that it took India to come and create these. Today, for example, there are so many colleges like yourselves, where young students are aspiring to do wonderful things. And I think that academic interest is growing a lot. I see that it's growing dramatically. It's not just 5 IITs. We used to be like back in my days, in 30 years ago, IITs were the only major suppliers of talent. Today, we, for example, in Deep Kapha on our research lab, we have a lot of folks sitting in Jaipur, in Assam, all over the place, and they are doing the world's most cutting edge work. So I think my advice would be to professors is definitely to collaborate more with your academic peers and colleagues in Europe and US. Please get out of that bureaucratic sort of hurdles and do that, because when you collaborate with international colleagues, it will provide your students the ability to work in international projects. Because you're right, the context of European problems leads to more innovative solutions. But if our students from India can collaborate in these situations, they can apply those solutions inside India as well. Because India has multitudes of problems to solve. To students, I think all in all, Indian students are very, very opportunistic, very, very motivated. And I think these kind of conversations already give you guys a floor to think again that, okay, what I can do. So I think I'm confident that the students will actually drive this revolution. And if your professors are doing the right things, meaning collaborating with research labs around the world, collaborating with academic partners and universities around the world, they can actually really achieve a lot. So I really think there's a lot of scope. But I think I'm hopeful that in the next 10, 20 years, India will definitely become a powerhouse as today, we think the US or China is.
That's true, sir. We also hope the same.
Thank you, sir, for encouragement. Thank you, sir, for encouragement. So now we would take some questions from the audience. We have a question. How soon do you think Project Hominis could be a part of our day-to-day lives?
Okay, so Hominis is I just shared something on LinkedIn because I was talking about Hominis, and we put up a first ad in a magazine a few days ago. So Hominis' goal is to solve the problem which we think GPT-3 unfortunately has not been able to solve, because the system is quite brittle, meaning it does not look at the semantic it cannot contextually or it cannot semantically contextualize a human-like conversation like you and I are having right now. It's quite brittle. It's when you try to give more questions, it'll either start giving you very weird answers because it's just deriving its intelligence based on the information from Reddit and from all the other social media channels. And as you know, on social media, people are not as friendly as when people talk to each other face-to-face basis. People are very rude. People can be mean. People tend to say very harsh things to each other. We don't know why this happens, but somehow apparently people are quite frustrated with their life that they tend to put up a lot of crap on the internet. So that's where, unfortunately, GPT-3 has trained its data from. In Hominis, we expect that in the next 2 years, multimodal system in which image, text, video, and speech will be, so we have several pipelines for these projects. We are currently applying for internships and getting internships. I mean, we are currently applying for projects and we are open for internships. And sure, if you're students, if you're interested, you can always reach out to me or my team or join our Slack group and we'll definitely sort of get you in. So what we're trying to do is we are trying to get the video, text, images, and speech data and try to starting to analyze it and then start stacking these models in a way where we have some architectural sort of optimizations, which obviously for reasons of intellectual property, I cannot share more details of it right now. But the goal is to actually provide a simplistic model that does not rely on training massive data sets. The goal is to make data sets that are curated by human beings. So objectionable language, other racially driven context or corpus is how would you say, normalized, and then making sure that the data which we are presenting is a data for a fair and a safe society. So when the timeline is around 2 years, I hope each year we can bring out some big innovations. We want to release Hominis in the next few months through API service. So we need some funding, obviously, because as you can imagine, GPT-3, they got $1 billion from Microsoft. But we are thinking that because our models will be optimized, they will be, we will use quantized models, meaning squeezing things into much smaller bitmaps that we can have a more efficient systems. And then our goal is to work together with the European Commission and see if we can release it for free. As you know, GPT-3, you have to pay. So you have to pay money, and many startups use that model. And then suddenly it becomes sort of a subscription model. So we are trying to see if we can create also an open source the system and give it away to European Union. And there will be some commercial variants which we will sell to businesses because we think businesses can pay. But we think consumers should have the right to be using a model that is fair, that is equitable, that is preserving their privacy. So I'm expecting 2 years. We have a very aggressive plan. So in 2 years, we expect Hominis, our ethical AI model. It's a SaaS platform plus API service should be released. But 2024, I hope that we will have something functioning and working. So we want to get all the social scientists to work with us. Unlike GPT-3, they just, some researchers, they sat together, they built something and they're optimizing on it, which I think is great. It's a great start, but we think Hominis will definitely try to improve upon that model.
Yes, sir. So we all will be waiting for it and welcome it. We have
from the audience. Okay, we'll be
we
taking
have another question.
One last
Okay,
question.
okay. So another question is, do VCs have a responsibility to distinguish between good and bad AI and move the technology forward while investing in the right AI companies?
Oh, I don't think so. I think VCs don't tend to see things or the world this way. Their goal is commercial. Their goal is, they're not human. I'm not saying they're not humanitarians. I think they're good human beings themselves, but they have a commercially driven goal. I don't think a VC intentionally wants to take bad AI company and invest in it. I don't think VCs know enough about what is good versus bad AI. Unless they themselves have been researchers and they have spent decades in artificial intelligence. But most VCs are typically bankers or, VCs are a past generation who built SaaS companies, or have been internet focused VCs. And the VCs who invested in internet companies had a different way of thinking, right? Their way of thinking was grow your company as fast as possible, based on get as much data from customers. But an AI company is doing exactly the opposite, or should be doing exactly the opposite, is don't just go and grab customers' data. It's their privacy, it's a private data. So I don't think VCs, I cannot speak for them, of course, but I don't think VCs are keeping an eye on, oh, I should be careful about privacy because, you know, I shouldn't invest in a company that is based on privacy. So I don't know, they do talk about it quite a lot that, you know, they're investing, but I think a VC's job is to manage portfolio of his companies. So all they care is how much money is this company making versus how much money is that company making. So in a way, yeah, it's, I don't think we should try to expect VCs to start becoming the regulators or, you know, the charming people who want to save the planet. But I have nothing against VCs. I invest myself in companies. I just make a conscious choice of not investing in startups that are based, that are more in social media or social networking. I don't invest in social networking startups because I still believe that the ideology behind such startups is you just have to grab as much consumer data. And so I do feel, because we are running our own startups in energy and climate AI, we believe in responsible AI, but I don't think every VC feels that way.
Thank you, sir. I hope that answers the question.
So we'll be ending the session here with the questions. So we are really thankful for your time and expertise. And the way you explained us via examples, you know, it's like even some basic person who is just like trying to explore the subject even more can understand such things and can get interested and become enthusiastic about the same. So we are really thankful of how you invested your time with us, and we are looking forward to interview again after 2 years with Hominins. And thank you so much, sir. We are really happy to meet you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It was a pleasure and I'm grateful. And I couldn't see many faces. I believe I saw there was quite a number of people here, and looking forward to seeing you succeed in your mission and getting great speakers and people who are able to inspire students and foster great exchange of information and ideas. Wishing you all the best, and do please stay in touch. Take care, and thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.